or thank you for having me. I never know which one it is, so I do both. We're reading from this. Okay. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Pujala Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nityanamani Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pujali Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschadati Vanchakalpatarubhishcha Krivasindhubheva Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Yeah, I'm glad to be here in this situation. It gives me a chance to feel that maybe I'm being a little bit useful for Guru Maharaj. It's like there's a point where there's not much else you can do than just try and do a little bit of service. So, Hare Krishna Maharaj. We're a little bit uncertain about what we have read and what we haven't read. So I
put dots in front.
You put dots. That was brilliant.
I didn't do it today, so.
You didn't do it today, like from. Oh, so we have. I see dots. Yeah. Okay, I'm just going to pick something. You'll tell me if you've heard it before. Oh, I like this. We bid each other farewell to connect deeper. Does that sound familiar? Or
Does it sound familiar?
let's find out.
No. I'm not sure.
This is meditation number
We
7.
did it the first day.
Huh? We may have done it the first
We
day?
have done it the first day.
Okay, I'll start reading and then you'll say boo if you heard it. Okay. The comfortable prisoner does not have a passion for elevation.
Yes.
That sounds familiar, doesn't it? I remember that. Oh, that's a negative one. Avoid that one. Life is simply so many breaths. That sounds pretty good. And there's a picture of cows. That's always a good sign. What we call life is really the activities performed by different species as they struggle to avoid their inevitable death. They try to cheat all-devouring death by focusing on eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. It is true that all of these areas are important to maintain for the survival of each species. However, they still do not prevent death from attacking and defeating the members of each species. When someone has few or no obstructions in their eating, sleeping, mating, and defending, it is considered by societal standards that they are having a good life. As we measure time, we think of how much longer an entity in its present body. We think of how much longer an entity has in its present body. We reflect on events and activities associated with an entity or entire species. Some species are born, reproduce, and die within 24 hours, while other species live for hundreds of years. However, in either case, it is all relative to the nature of the living entity. Life is simply so many breaths. When we take our last breath in this body, the soul departs and petitions for its next existence. The whole of creation simply endures during the breath of Mahavishnu and is withdrawn when he inhales. In the spiritual world, there is no deterioration of the body, no deaths, and no time. Everything has always existed and will always exist. Yes, event and activities, variegated, ever fresh, full of joy, and eternal. The material world is called Kuntha, a place of misery and anxiety, while the spiritual world is conversely called Vaikuntha, a place of no suffering or anxiety. Bhaya, or fear, pervades all atmospheres in the material universe. This fear is associated with the constant uncertainty about the future, which leads us to try to speed up, slow down, or stop various events from happening. For some, Kala, or time, is their best friend because in time something wonderful or pleasant will happen. For others, time is their worst enemy, for in the future they will experience some great misfortune. However, For all entities that do not become God conscious, time will prove to be an ultimate enemy in disguise. This is a good one, right? Because in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, time I am. So for the person who's not God conscious, time is an enemy, because if you're not God conscious, you're not serving Krishna. And so that's what Krishna is, death, right? It's inevitable. And this is, incidentally, this is in chapter 11, where Arjuna asks to see the universal form, right? And he sees everything everywhere all at once. I think there's a recent movie called that, which is basically, that's your universal form. It's like everything, time and space condensed into one form. And it turns out it's a little too much for Arjuna, right? Because we're small, we can only comprehend so much. And I think there is a parallel to what we're experiencing here, is like our eternal relationship with our Guru is being challenged by the ultimately superfluous but very present like material incident of his body now ceasing to function. Does that make sense? So it's like a real test for your God consciousness. Are you going to transcend this? It's like, I have a problem transcending the monkeys out there when I'm walking past and they're like looking at me like, you want to go? You know, it's like, I call the security guard with this bamboo stick and I'm like, can you know, but this one arguably is a lot bigger, right? So it's a test of our God consciousness, but ultimately what is also hinted at here is that when you are God conscious, when you are truly God conscious, you are essentially living in Vaikuntha, not in Kunta, right? It is fearless, it is eternal. Our relationship with Maharaj is not actually affected by this. I have the great fortune of doing what we sometimes call frontline preaching in a place called London, which is kind of like the epicenter of Kali Yuga. And sometimes when it's really rough, which it is sometimes, that's actually the closest I feel to Maharaj. Like I feel like very confident that he would really enjoy my suffering right now. Because the thing is, he wants me to go back in this lifetime, and that means there's a certain amount of conditioning that has to go before I leave my body. And when it's really challenging and I'm still going up like beyond my own little self-pity, that's when the purification is happening. You know what I mean? It's not just that you're uncomfortable and that's purifying. That can just as easily just build more resentments. That's what we see with the demons, right? They're never happy, but they're not really being purified either, right? They just build newer and newer resentments against Krishna. But when we're out there, this is like my the drum I keep beating. When we're out there doing service that Maharaj would be pleased for us to do, it's not necessarily frontline preaching. It can also be like devotee care and community building and serving the deity. Whatever our service is, if we do it with the right mentality, Maharaj will be so pleased. And that's when our relationship with him has not changed at all. Right? I'm also very fortunate that I've spent a lot of time in Mayapur, and Maharaj also spent a lot of time in Mayapur, and we were living like just down the hall from each other, and we were just hanging out. Like, how many can say they do that with their Guru Maharaj?
You were in a school circle.
Yeah.
In Mayapur.
Yeah. He came to my classes. Imagine that, and Jayadvaita Swami too. Someone told me that might be the first time in our entire parampara that someone has had their guru and their param guru in the audience giving class. That is a scary thing, I can tell you. That's like having Jayadvaita Swami in the audience. It's like, I better not mess up. And yet, I think the closest I feel to him is still like when he's not there. Like when I'm going above and beyond what I feel like for the mission, that like when you're with him, you never really truly know if he's satisfied with you, right? But you're out there on the front line and you're getting slapped by the modes. You know that he's approving of that. So that's the difference, right? That's death is something different for us actually, but we're a little bit neophytes, so it's always good for us to remind each other. It can be challenging to remember. Do we have any questions or comments on this point, or any thoughts, criticism, chastisement? Also, we're open.
No, I did. Sorry, it's happened. It just reminds me when you were speaking about chastising and all those things. You know, it reminds me of Srila Prabhupada. You know, how some of the Bhakti Swami Maharaj. He was telling the story how I had been being chastised by Prabhupada so often, and later he understood, he realized that was his best time.
Yeah.
That's a gift.
Yeah. That the chastisement is some of the best association you can have with your guru. I remember one time I picked up Maharaj at Kolkata airport. We were going back, and all the devotees were excited that Maharaj was coming, and they were texting me on the phone, when is he coming? When is he coming? And I was kind of like trying, like my phone was kind of like hiding it from Maharaj and texting back. We were in the car probably a couple of hours. And Maharaj was like, what are you doing? And well, you know, the devotees were asking, and Maharaj looks at me and he's like, you shouldn't have a phone. Because Maharaj, he likes to arrive and just take a little rest and then have court for all the devotees. It's like he doesn't, you know, it's like he's been traveling for a long time. So I knew that's like the beginning of a few months of Maharaj being there. So then I knew this is going to be a good year. This is going to be good, right? Because I'm gonna get a lot of direct instructions, you know. Because you can speed up your advancement a lot when you trust your guru, right? Because that means you don't have to make all the mistakes yourself. That's the thing with this Western idea of freedom, is just go out and make a lot of mistakes. Okay, sure, you can really get some realization that way, but isn't it easier if someone just tells you a little bit like what's your nature and what would work for you, and you just do it without getting hurt so much? It sounds okay to me, right? So I definitely know that I have a knack for getting myself into trouble. Like sometimes I speak before I think, sometimes I act before I think, and he's definitely saved me from a lot of insane situations. Yeah. Usually, the way I'm trained, like if anyone has a question at any time, just like in the middle of a sentence, that's fine. We'll just stop and. For some unfortunate souls who in the future must experience some specific chastisement, penalty or difficulty, reflecting on the future brings even greater anxiety and fear. An example is the inmate on death row who has been sentenced to death in 1 month, or the hostage who receives the news that he or she will be assassinated in 24 hours. Even the worker who finds out that in 1 week he must start working with a team of colleagues who will give him hell will experience tremendous anxiety. Others who anticipate a great boon, reward or auspicious accomplishment are very excited as they contemplate the future. For example, the prisoner who learns that he or she will be paroled in 1 month, the hostage who finds out that he can return to his family in 24 hours, and the worker who is informed that she will be promoted to the position of CEO in 1 week, will all feel much happiness. Just imagine how much excitement and happiness the residents of the spiritual world constantly feel, knowing that every future experience will be more rewarding and fulfilling than the previous encounter. The more rewarding the future events will be, the greater the anticipation, excitement and joy. In the spiritual world, there is no deterioration of the body, no death and no time. Everything has always existed and will always exist. Yes, events and activities are variegated, ever fresh, full of joy and eternal. I have, as I mentioned, one of my preaching fields is addicts, and they have this thing. I've coined this phrase: preemptive resentment. That because when you're an addict, you live in so much fear that you anticipate everything going wrong, right? And it becomes like a self-fulfilling prophecy. So if they have to go to the shop, they are preempting the resentment of having to deal with the person at the till, the counter, right? They're already having the argument in their head, and when they take the bus, they're preempting the resentment of the bus being late, and like everything is like it's not even happened. And who was it, Mark Twain, who said, "I've gone through some hellish times in my life, and some of them actually happened," right? It's like that's the world we're living in because of the fear. Like a lot of the suffering we experience is only happening in our head, right? Now, unfortunately, that means that when something distressing does happen, it's like we have like a build-up of pain and feeling like the world is unjust and unfair and problematic, and so sometimes like what we're going through now is like, yeah, see, the world is horrible, right? But actually, much of the emotional experience is something we've built up over time just in our head because we're not as advanced as we hopefully will be tomorrow and the day after, right? So it's I've said this before also, it's a great luxury actually to have this God family, because this is the relief. Like the point Bhaktivinoda Thakur says is the heart of the Sri Chaitanya Samaj is the Ishtagosti, is the devotees coming together and discussing Krishna Katha and revealing their mind in confidence. Like if something is troubling us, it's not necessarily fault finding, or like if something is disturbing our Krishna consciousness, it's okay to reveal it, right? Just don't start posting it on Facebook. That's the litmus test.
So
Yeah.
you spoke about anticipation and how in the spiritual world the next experience is going to be even more blissful. So for Maharaj it's going to be like that.
Yeah.
The next is going to be much more blissful. Do you feel like he's anticipating on that also?
Definitely he is. That's also kind of why he's a little bit annoyed right now at the bodily, because he knows where he's going. So it's like, but then at the same time, see, here's the thing, and here's like part of why we're sitting here and not there. He's still our guru. Like he was still like a couple of days ago, and I suspect still now, he's still like doing his 16 rounds. I was sitting with him when Indrajumna Swami was trying to convince him, and Jayadvaita Swami, trying to convince him, you don't like 16 rounds now, just remember. And Maharaj was like, no. My disciples have vowed to do 16 rounds. What will they say about me if I don't do 16 rounds? If I don't do my 16 rounds, they will become weak. So he's still the guru, right? And so right now also he's cooling his body. Like that's the thing that happens before death, is that the body heats up and then goes cold, right? But he's cooling his body right now, which if you're just happy to go back to the spiritual world, why would you do that? But he's doing that for us, because he's slowing down the process so we get a chance to process it, right? Because there's like, if you see rasa tattva, the philosophy of how rasa like transforms in your mind, it takes time. There are certain transformations that take place, and it takes a little time. So Maharaj is like, he's like on the edge right now. He's ready to go, but he's just finishing up here, and part of that is what we're doing now. He's allowing us to do this, like to process this, so it's not such a shock, because what can happen if there's like a shock of a separation, it can really hurt your faith. We were talking also about the passing of Bhishma Dev, where he's lying on the bed of arrows, and he can choose when he leaves the body, right? But he's not going to be skateboarding any day soon, right? So he's lying there in tremendous pain, but he's waiting so the emotions can be processed and they can grieve, because detached doesn't mean you don't care. It just means that you don't make it about yourself. Like, I mean, I've seen sometimes, I'm not criticizing, it's just we are where we are, but I've seen sometimes when a guru leaves that there are some devotees, they make it about themselves, and it's like, I can't do my service because my guru is gone. And it's like, do you think your guru would want you to stop doing your service and whine? Or do you think he would want you to? But that's also why we're slowing down, so we get a chance to process it, so that when it happens, we do the ritual, put him in samadhi, and then the strength of our relationship with Guru Maharaj will be that we continue our service and we make him proud for the rest of our lives. That makes sense. Yeah. You had something?
Yes, talking about managing the process itself, but not always. It's not always affect with sanghasis. It reminds me of how His Holiness Krishna
Exactly.
left his body by an accident.
Yeah.
And the same happened with Govinda Maharaj.
Yeah.
Gopal, and he was gone. So.
Yeah, I would say there's probably a difference between Tamal Krishna Goswami, which literally was an accident, like it was just gone, right? And you can see some of the devotees who were very close with him, they still have a scar from that. It's still that shock, like almost like post-traumatic stress, right? So that's why in the situations like that Maharaj is in now, he's slowing down this process. So it's a little bit like, it's like, okay, rip off a Band-Aid, but if the Band-Aid is all over your body, it's a little intense to rip the whole thing off. Your skin might come off. Like, it's a little too much. So slow it down, give you time to process it, and
So we can digest it easier.
Yeah, and so we can come together and do what we're doing now and strengthen our bonds with each other, because it takes a little time also to reconfigure what is my God family now. It's not Guru Maharaj in the center and all of us around. Now we're going to have to carry it on with each other, right?
And he's still giving us possibilities to serve him.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah. But that will never end.
How much he cares.
Yeah. But that will never end, right? Because preaching is like the best service we can do for him, or serving other devotees, and that is always unlimited, right? There's always service. Yeah.
How do we take great loss with great grace?
Oh. It's a tough one, because you do it with sincerity. What I mean by that is, you don't want to bottle it up and repress it and try and pretend like you're not as affected as you are. That's what will repression accomplish. You're just going to blow up in the wrong way at the wrong time. And I had one actually yesterday and today, for whatever reason, weren't great for me. And there was one incident in particular where I kind of snapped at someone for something that was not their. I mean, they were wrong. So but it was not about that. It was about me just feeling like crap, right? So I'm trying to be Mr. Senior Disciple and take care, and that makes me feel useful, and that's great. But in these situations, it becomes difficult to keep the balance, right? Because there's also a storm. You're in a storm, and you're trying to. So that was a little bit. I had to just sit down for a moment, and I need to speak with someone, and I did. Right, just unloaded my mind, and I'm better now, right? But you also don't want to be, like we were saying before, overly. Then you make it about yourself. There's like a certain level of talking about a problem that helps, but then sometimes people see psychologists and they just keep going to the psychologist and talking about how difficult their life is, and they just keep reiterating, oh, it's so difficult being me, and it's so hard, and I really need some therapy, and they just actually get worse, right? So when we were talking about this example with Bhishma Dev's passing, like Krishna is in the room, right? Like Yudhishthira, like they're doing all right in their Krishna consciousness, right? So, but they're morose, they're sober, they're very sad, because there's a great personality leaving. So we should also take a page out of that book. But then the moment that gets in the way of the relationship they have with each other, the Vaishnavas that are still there, then it's time to move past it. Does that make sense? Like, because otherwise it becomes like wallowing in self-pity, and you actually cut yourself off from the relationships and the service that is still there, right? And now it ceases to serve a purpose. So the only way to gauge that is your sincerity. And how do you build sincerity? You chant good rounds, you do your sadhana, you follow the regs, all the advice that we get. That's what sadhana bhakti means, is to build sincerity, build faith, dismantle the false ego bit by bit, right? Does that work? Yeah, okay, thank you. Yes?
I have a quick question. When you were saying earlier about this situation, testing our transcendental vision once his body leaves, it made me think of the transition, and something that I thought of often was, it might be a silly question, but I'm curious your take on it. Once he's gone from this world, and let's say we have a dream with him, how do we know if that's just our mind dreaming of the people in our lives, or is that really him consciously coming to us? Because maybe now while he's alive, we might have dreams with him that he doesn't know about, of his over 1,000 disciples, but will it be different once he's gone and that's not just our mind, but really him visiting us?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, let's repeat the question. After Maharaj goes into Samadhi, if or when we have a dream about Maharaj, how do we know whether that's actually him communicating with it, or it's just a figment of our imagination, just a mind burp? What I would do, because that's not clear, right? What I would do is pretend it is him, but outwardly pretend it's just a dream. What we want to avoid is, Guru Maharaj came to me in a dream last night, right? Don't do that. That's BS. That's like trying to be more advanced than you are, right? But because you literally don't know, right? It's hard in a dream. And there are plenty of examples from our scripture with advanced devotees and I've had a couple of dreams that I'm like, that wasn't an ordinary dream kind of thing. But when I talk about it, it's only with devotees that I'm very intimate with, that I have a very strong relationship with my peers. Definitely not junior devotees. I wouldn't disclose, it's too intimate. And it's definitely not like Instagram worthy, right? You know what I mean? It's like internal. But then pretend that it is Guru Maharaj. What's he trying to say? Right? What is it I can take away from whatever that dream was, right? So just because we're on the topic, I'll relay one I had. And I have no idea what it was, but the dream was that I was out hunting with Maharaj and we were shooting for the rhino. Right? We were literally on a savanna in Africa and we were shooting for the rhino, and the way I took it was, think big when you think preaching, right? So whether that was my mind coming up with it or Maharaj just visiting me for a short moment there, actually is kind of secondary, because I feel like if the takeaway that I take from that dream is, okay, go big or go home, right? He would like that. He's that kind of guy, right? And if you fail, there's no loss or diminution in Krishna consciousness. It's just you get purified, and Lord knows I've been purified, right? But I've also done some things that I didn't think I was able to do. So that would be the way I take, because there's no like website where you can tap in some and you get the answer. Yeah, that was your guru. You could also share it with a very senior devotee or something, just like, because if nothing else, they can also give you guidance in how do you read this dream. And then finally, sometimes also remember that dreams are just dreams. You know what I mean? Sometimes we get too much into astrology or too much into dreams or palmistry, or it can be a distraction also, right? But it's never a bad thing if you have a dream about your guru, right? It's never a bad thing. So, is that? Yeah.
Maybe maybe Prabhupada wanted you to read the book Chasing
Yeah,
Rabbits
I
with
thought
Swami.
about
It hadn't come out yet. It hadn't come out yet, but I do have it. I have it now. Yeah. So yeah.
And would your answer be the same? Like, is it the same whether they're physically present or once they leave?
Yeah. Yeah.
The same.
That doesn't change. It's really about like the true transcendental part of the relationship with the guru is like, how would you have me go back to Godhead, right? That's the point of the whole relationship, is we go back to Godhead, right? Now, the best way to do that is somehow preaching or spreading or bringing others closer to Krishna. That is the most effective. We're Ghostianandis, not Bhajananandis. So we're out there, we're extroverted, the devotees, not introverted. Now, if you could do that according to your nature, so that, what does that mean? It just means if you can do it without people complimenting you on it. Does that make sense? Like, I can publicly speak, and if someone doesn't come up to me afterwards and said that was amazing, I'm still okay. But a lot of people are like uneasy about public speaking, so they can only do it if everyone comes up afterwards and pat them on. And I would be like that with book distribution. Like, the moment, like, I can have 19 people in a row that take a book and give a sizable donation. The 20th who doesn't, that's it, I'm done for the day. This clearly is not working. Like, I'm not comfortable with it, like that way of preaching. So I do it differently. But then I preach to CEOs and addicts and like weirdos that really, they think ultra fast, have no problem with it. Why? I don't know. It's just my nature. So you find that place where you can do it without needing to be complimented all the time. And that's the easiest way back to Godhead. That's the recommended way for you. Right? That's your swadharma. Yeah. Hare Krishna. You had something?
Just back to the dream aspect. I had this question a couple of weeks ago, and then I asked one of our godfathers, and he said
I'll
that,
repeat it.
can you hear me?
Yeah.
He asked Maharaja directly. He said that I had a dream about you, Maharaja, and Maharaja said that wasn't me in the dream.
Yeah.
And so like he was being very kind of like out there, saying what it was. And then I got senior, someone that sees a mentor, and she said to me, whenever you have a dream, if you have a dream of Maharaja or someone senior, you should always write it down or any interaction. But then obviously I was told this, that Maharaja said to someone that that wasn't him in the dream. So I kind of like thinking, okay, which one is it then? And then she said that Prabhupada also said that when you have a dream of the Spirit it actually isn't something just like.
Yeah. So the comment more is like that someone said to Maharaj, like, I had a dream about you. Maharaj said that wasn't me. It wasn't me. And it's also something Prabhupada has said. And it's because, like, that's the generic answer. It's not, don't think that you're so advanced and you have some transcendental dream about the spiritual master. If we see the scriptures where that happens, it's like Narottam Das Thakur. Are you on that level even remotely, right? Like, so it's sometimes we get this idea, I had a dream, I must be an Uttamadhikari, right? Like, I have some special relationship with, and it's just real effective to just say, yeah, that was not me. End of discussion, right? But it doesn't take away from the fact that, okay, like, let's say that it was. What would it mean? Like, how should I act on this dream so that Guru Maharaj would be proud, that he would be pleased, right? But that's also why, as I say, like, don't go around and showboating your dreams about your Guru Maharaj, because that means you haven't understood. It's like way too intimate for that. Yeah. Thank you for that comment. That was good.
I have comment also to this one.
Yeah. More comments.
When I met first time Guru Maharaj, it was actually in my dream.
I
never met him before, and he came to my dream.
Yes.
So when I met him, I went and I asked him, like, Guru Maharaj, Maharaja, I met you actually in my dream, and I told him the dream, and he started smiling. He was like, during the day we see gold and mountain, and at night we see gold and mountain.
Yeah.
So you were reading Bhagavatam, so something happened, and somehow you saw me. But maybe you saw me before on some picture or something.
Yeah.
So, and he said that I was like, so how can I take this as the dream that you were there and you were instructing me? He said, okay, Prabhupada is instructing me in Bhagavatam, and then you saw maybe my picture or something. So you should always take it the treasure of what you get in the dream, but it doesn't mean that it's real.
Yeah.
But you should take the nectar or the inspiration from it.
Exactly. Everybody heard that? So it's like, yeah, we know, like, we've seen a mountain and we've seen gold, and then suddenly we see a golden mountain, right? And so it's just don't overemphasize these things. There's like, sometimes we have this problem with distinguishing correlation with causation. Just because we see him doesn't mean that he came to me, some special. But it does mean that you have a samskara from him. But even, like, let's say it's true, like you randomly saw some picture from him. There's still a reason why that popped up into your dream, because we see a lot of pictures of a lot of people and they don't all pop up in our dreams, right? And so there is something, and it may just be your mind just like latching over there, here's a transcendental person or something, right? So it still has value. It's just like Guru Maharaj is not our mascot who shows up in our dreams and like, hey, like, that's not how it works, right? So it's just about having the right mood, and like you're saying, yeah, take inspiration from that, and then, like, how do I reciprocate with this samskara in my mind in a way that would be pleasing for Maharaj, right? And thereby strengthening the relationship, and who knows, one day it may happen. Yeah, thank you. Hare Krishna.
In other cases where Swamis have departed, has there been cases where someone then coordinates or facilitates the God-family relationship, or is it just like normally self-organizing?
So I am not intimately familiar with all the Swamis' God families, but I do know that there's something I would like for us not to do, and that is to become complacent.
Yeah.
I know that, I'm not going to mention names, but I know that some departed Swamis, they've had, like, right after it's like daily Zoom calls, and now we're really gonna, and then after a year it just fizzles out and everyone just gets on with their own little lives. So I think, and this is just me thinking out loud, is that I think it's important to find a framework that we can relate to each other and maintain our relationship as a family. But don't be too passionate about it, because the fact is that daily Zoom calls is going to be too much for everybody, and it may be that right in the beginning we have a strong emotional need to like bond and be very active, but the problem is that as that need will inevitably diminish, it might diminish down to zero, right? So sometimes in planning stuff like this, it's better to start at a level that is closer to what you'll maintain, or in a fashion. I mean, there's so many ways you can associate. We're spread all over the world, right? But there's so many ways that we can stay connected via the internet. And so whether it's like local chapters, that makes sense, because like devotees in England or devotees in Central Europe, Germany, Holland, it's easier for them to actually meet in person, so it makes sense that they will have some chapter where also online, like, I don't know, WhatsApp group, Facebook, whatever, right? Like, there's that we can also we can always like discuss the details, but I have seen that it starts out like fire and brimstone, and then a year after it's like, it's because you just can't maintain it. So yeah. Does that make, yeah. It could be, there are some devotees that are really good at like managing these types of things. I'm a little bit like Jayadvaita Swami, I can't manage my way out of a wet paper bag, but I'm always happy to show up, and I can always like do what I'm doing now forever. I think my longest Q&A was 7.5 hours. So we use it's like back to the point with you, like whatever you can do without burning yourself out, that's what you do, right? And we see if we can position each other so that we can all help each other and keep like family relations going. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
I'm thinking about this whole topic of dreams.
Mm-hmm.
I think it really goes down to our desire to have personal connection with our spiritual master. So could you maybe elaborate how we can really build deeper relationship? I mean, well, Mark is here, but also in the future there's just so many references in the scripture.
Yeah, there's we are.
What was the
Okay, so the question is, like, continuing like from the topic of dreams. I'm maybe paraphrasing here. You can correct me if I get it wrong. That basically the question is, how do we continue to build a personal relationship with Maharaj, like while he's here, but also once he's passed on, right? Because a dream is indicative of some personal attachment relationship to Maharaj. Is that correct? Yeah. So we know that Maharaj was very attached to Chaitanya Charitamrita. So we could read that, right, a little bit extra than like if we value that also as the scripture that we might be like trying to look at closer, that would be a way of like trying to enter into his mind. We're fortunate because we have hundreds, if not thousands of hours of recordings of Maharaj, and whenever, it's one of the beautiful things when Maharaj is speaking, different disciples will latch on to different things that are like their favorite things he says, and that's where your personality and Maharaj's personality intersects, right? Like there's some things he says where I'm like, yeah, Maharaj, now you're going on about that thing again. I not in that mood, but you know what I mean, right? But then there are others, like I'm seeing like other devotees like doting over Maharaj because that's just so beautiful, right? Because we're different, we're individuals, right? I have a very tattva kind of approach to, I love to think about philosophy and abstract concepts, and so whenever Maharaj gets into that, I'm like, yeah, here we go, right? And then I see like sometimes also a lot of women are like just like deer in the headlights, right? And whatever, right? And then he gets into some other like stories from, you know, his trips through Iran and like all the crazy stuff he's done, where I've heard those stories and they're great, but then other devotees are just like, you can just see they're like beaming with fascination, right? So wherever that is, that's where our personal relationship with Maharaj is special, right? And every one of us has a unique like configuration of these things. None of us think exactly the same things are inspiring in exactly the same way. So there's a like a smorgasbord of recordings that we can use to remind ourselves of our personal relationship with Maharaj, and actually develop it also, and develop our ideas of how am I going to reciprocate, right? How can I be a vessel for that rasa that Maharaj represents? Is that okay? Yeah. Thank you. Read it a little more, maybe? Okay. Where are we? In the material world, as time is ticking away, some people are very excited about a temporary boon, reward or achievement, while others are in great anxiety about a future chastisement, punishment or penalty. All will ultimately experience Kala as the most cruel if the real purpose of life is not realized. The ultimate reward will be another material body in one of the material universes that are mainly designed to facilitate the living entities and species in their endeavor to run away from their eternal home, the kingdom of God. Prahlad Maharaj emphasized that we must not waste this life and its valuable time in just pursuing mundane goals and achievements. Even as a child, we must pursue a more meaningful life. Kadamba Maharaj became fully God conscious in just moments. We do not have to procrastinate or involve ourselves in superfluous activities. For the materialist, who will encounter temporary as well as ultimate punishments, temporary and ultimate anxiety will be their rewards. But the reward will be different for the devotees of the Lord, who contemplate a future in which they can return to the spiritual world, a place in which there is no deterioration of the body, no death, and no time, where everything has always existed and will always exist. Yes, events and activities are variegated, ever fresh, full of joy, and eternal. All species and entities should use this life for what it is really meant, rather than just for eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. Rather than wasting so many breaths and encountering varieties of temporary happiness and distress, we should use life as a divine opportunity to become deathless, in a timeless existence where we can eternally participate and breathe in the nectar of Krishna Katha. I am that lowly beggar who will soon give up his last material breath to humbly breathe in the nectar of Krishna's divine aroma.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Yes.
He had his moments,
Yeah.
a lot of them. Yeah, so that's a pretty good reminder, right? That this is actually our destination also, right? Is that like we will literally be with Maharaj again and bounce around in the spiritual world and in whatever form we take, right? And we will be fully purified at that time, because you can't bring conditioning with you into the spiritual world. And so that is our destination, that is our life, right?
This song, Guru Vandana, is it Guru Vandana? Shri Guru Charana, He is my Lord, birth after birth.
Yeah.
From him ecstatic and
Emanates.
He is my Lord, birth after birth.
Yeah.
Yes.
Preferably just birth.
Yes.
But yeah, like we talked about yesterday. But that is the lyrics. Like that.
I'm translating the lyrics,
Yeah, which means eternally, right?
Yeah.
In the
Yeah.
verse. But could we relate that prayer to Jagat Guru, like the Guru, like Balaram, or is it like our Guru Dev personal?
You can, but just don't try to jump over, right?
No,
But that's like Nityananda is the eternal merciful principle, right? Or Balaram, you can just as long as we know the order, like.
In the sense that if I come back our next life and our Guru Dev, like he's liberated and then get initiated again, I don't know. I'm just making up like I'm speculating.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I mean now it gets into some complicated stuff, because Guru Tattva is very complicated. We were talking about the Satchitananda Vigraha, like the Guru's body is non-different from spiritual energy. But then the question is, when the Guru literally leaves that body, is it still spiritual energy, right? And there's also the point you're bringing up is that, like, okay, what if I'm not fully purified? What if I do get distracted? In the end, I take another birth, I get initiated again. Then who is it, right? Like, is it
Jagat Guru, like personified someone?
It's kind of like Jesus saying, like, there is only my path, or something like that, right? And Krishna also says, everyone follows my path, right? So it's not that, like, the relationship is eternal because it's transcendental. Only material things are temporary, right? So therefore it is eternal, right? But our line, if you look at it, it's not actually a diksha line, it's a shiksha line. It goes from the instructions. So you can take instructions from multiple sources, right? So the kind of, like, it's just like the diksha is it makes sense that your shiksha guru would be your diksha guru, because it's like the ritual that plugs you in, right?
Yeah. Or the contrary, like the diksha would be your shiksha anyway. And the diksha is your shiksha anyway?
It would be, right? In my case, it turns out it isn't, right? Because Maharaj, his instruction to me when he initiated me was that I should take my shiksha from Bhakti Swami in Mayapur, because it's just the way he explains it just fits my brain. Like, I think in the same way that he does. So, like, It's just that tiny thing, like the logic in my brain, like we associate in the same way. And so Maharaj was just like, you're in Mayapur anyway, so you take instruction from him. Not in what I'm doing, but like I study philosophy under him. And so whenever I have a life crisis, which is regularly, every day, you know, I turn to Kadamba Swami or Jayadvaita Swami, right? But just studying. So it's not always the same, right? Like, but it would be. It makes sense. It's logical that you would find someone that you like. The shiksha is actually what attracts you, and then a natural extension of that is that one day, lo and behold, here's a fire sacrifice and garland, and now you have a new name, right? There's no point in seeking out someone else, right?
And the way it says, it's like Krishna is the guru, right? Like,
ultimately,
person,
yeah.
right? And then, and the great devotees are like the medium.
Yeah, they're plugging you in
Yeah.
to the parampara. The chit potency, which is the spiritual potency of the internal potency, flows through the parampara. That's why you have to take instruction from a bona fide source, because otherwise it'll just be philosophy. And there's plenty of people who know plenty of philosophy but have no idea what it means, right?
No realization.
Yeah, and there are other people who are dumber than a bag of hammers, and they can just floor these intellectuals in a discussion because they have chit potency, right? And we've seen it, right? So it's like, if we take the example of next lifetime, I'm back, oh shit, can't believe I did this, right? The samskar has to be done again anyway, or let's put it in a different way. If I think I don't need to be initiated, that tells me something about my attitude.
Yeah. That was not my thought.
No. We're just exploring the whole thing, right? Yeah. So anyone really self-realized, completely liberated devotees, if you ask them, do you need to be initiated? They would say yes. The Ragatmikas who like Rupa Goswami, he doesn't show up for Mangalarti because he's been composing poetry for 18 hours straight. He completely forgot time and space, right? He's so advanced, he doesn't have to follow any rules. You ask him, do you need to go up for Mangalarti? He'll say yes. So anyone who says they don't need to because they're spontaneous, they're sporadic. There's a difference between spontaneous and sporadic. It's kind of like a light that's not completely working, kind of flickering there. Yeah, that's borderline not even neophyte. Right, that's bordering between sahaja and neophyte, right? So you'd always want to get initiated, but there's nothing taken away from your relationship with Kadamba Swami if they're in another lifetime, is another initiation happening. Your relationship with him is still eternal, and if I hope the next initiation is bona fide, then there will be no. It's an overlap. It's the same thing they're teaching, and so the transcendental relationship is not constrained by time and space, and that means there's no conflict, right? Does that make sense? Yeah.
When you said at the beginning the relationship's only eternal with the spiritual master because it's a spiritual relationship, so it's transcendental, and in the spiritual realm it's always eternal. Is that the only reason? Because maybe I interpreted it also like, I don't know, you hear that, okay, in the spiritual world each spiritual master might have their own camps, and when you go there it's the eternal relationship, so you'll be forever.
No, that's also there, right?
So it's not like only because it's a spiritual relationship which makes it eternal. Like that almost feels like it takes away from the relationship aspect of the relationship.
No, the only relationship there is a spiritual relationship. Yeah. There is no material relationship. That's Maya, right? That's just a transaction. Like if I smile at you, you smile at me, that makes me happy, now I think I have a relationship with you. That's just the modes carrying on. So the only real relationships we have are spiritual. And that's like in second chapter of Bhagavad Gita, it's explained that if something is not eternal, you can't really call it real. It's like a wave on the ocean. Is it a thing? It's just like a state. So we were talking about 2 days ago how you're building a house and it's actually falling apart while you're building it, because it's just the nature of material energy. So is it really a real thing? Like the concept of house is a real thing, because it's spiritual. They have houses in the spiritual world. We're trying to imitate because we want to be God, but it's not real because we're not God. And so it's just like, it's like a dream, right? It's like a video game. I used to make video games. And we would have all these worlds that we would travel around in, but they weren't real. And ultimately you do get bored. Like, even though it is kind of fun to have extra lives, I could use that sometimes in my, but you know, it's not real. Like the soft ice doesn't taste like anything. Like the money, you can't spend it. Like the you know, there's no, and that's really the material world. And that's what I learned when I came to Krishna consciousness. I was already in a video game. I didn't need to make other video games, right? Because this is the game of illusion. And the only way to win is to get out. And that's real and that's eternal. So that's they're synonymous. Eternal and real are
Can you
synonymous.
say one is empty and the other one is not empty?
Yeah, it's just a reflection.
It's a reflection, okay.
It's like trying to feed ice cream to the reflection in a mirror.
Yes.
The reflection is not going to care because it's not real, right? So that's why, like I was talking about, I preach to these CEOs. They know that. Because they're at a point now where their material success is so large that they can project that there's nothing that will satisfy me. That's why they're good to preach at, right? Because it's like, how much money do you think you need before you're satisfied? And just watch their brain just melt. They know that, they know there's nothing. There's not enough money in the world to satisfy one person, right? Because it's not real. Yeah. But that's also why you see a different smile. I was telling this to Vasudev the other day that I was arguing with this. I did this thing called Ask a Monk. I would sit in public spaces with a sign, Ask a Monk any topic. And it would be these places where normally you wouldn't see a monk. So I did it in front of the White House. I did it at NASA Space Center in Houston. I did it at Venice Beach, and I did it also in Oslo in like the busy shopping street. So I just sat there with my rudimentary sign. And so this physicist came over and said, "Ha! But what I'm doing is scientific and what you're doing is not scientific." At the time I was arguing with discussing with a young Muslim atheist. So I'm assuming she's Muslim by culture and atheist by philosophy. That was my guess, right? And she was asking, why don't you just believe in Santa Claus? And we were going back and forth with that one, right? And so, good times. And we had a little audience, right? There were like people walking through, what's going on over there? There's someone with a hijab and a guy in bed sheets arguing on the street. And so we had a whole little crowd there. And this guy, mustache, a little overweight, he came over and said, "Aha! I'm scientific and you're not scientific." And so I said, okay, what is science? Can we say that science is you have a thesis and then you run an experiment or a series of experiments, and based on the outcome of those experiments you confirm or deny that your thesis is either correct or false. We can go with that. So I said, I have a thesis that I can attain a higher state of consciousness in which I can perceive a spiritual reality. My experiment is my japamala. I showed him my japamala, and here's the and by running this experiment on myself, I can realize that is actually true. And not only that, millions of people for thousands of years have done this, and I defy you to find one person who say it doesn't work. That's a lot of data points pointing in one direction. So now I pose it to you. What was your scientific process to arrive at the conclusion that I was unscientific? Dead silence, right? Did that convince him? No. He's a scientist. His entire ego is caught up in being an atheist. However, I had a maha cookie. So while the people were clapping and celebrating my defeat of the physics professor, I gave him a maha cookie and said, "Thank you for the conversation, I really enjoyed it." And so he walks off with this atheistic young Muslim girl, and I have to now control the crowd because now they're talking about, anything is true, and like total Mayavad. And I'm no. So, but then 5 minutes later, like people have dispersed and I'm sitting there alone again. The physics professor comes back and he said, that was a very nice cookie. And the moral of the story is that Mahaprasadam is better than philosophy. Because it is imbued with the chit potency. We were talking about the chit potency. It's eternal. You have no defense. So that cookie, that got him thinking. I want to thank him for that. So I'm a good orator. I'm a good debater. I've never convinced anyone of anything. Mahaprasad, Harinam. I can, like, sometimes people get convinced, like if I can use examples, but it's only when they try it out, when they taste that higher taste, then we got them, right? So that's why preaching St. Francis of Assisi, and this is like Guru Maharaj in a nutshell, right? You see him down the street like King's Day, full steam ahead. People look at him, I have no idea what he's on, but I want something, right? I want it, right? They don't know what's going on and they lose their mind. It is they will never forget that experience, right? That's a chit potency.
And they were all joining him.
Yeah.
Because King's Day is always,
It's
King's Day means everybody is in orange.
Yeah.
Because
Exactly.
orange is the color of the king.
Oh, is
the
it
queen.
true?
Yes.
Yeah. They're all in saffron.
And we organized it, and they thought this is something special for the king or the queen, and they joined us in a wall with beer and all the stuff.
And the thing is, they've been standing around all day, drinking, waiting for the party to happen, and nothing happens. That's the thing. That's the reflection. There is no taste in it. They've just like, and then if we don't come, they would just drink themselves into a stupor and then kind of make up the day after, like the weekend I can't remember as the weekend I will never forget kind of thing. Like, oh, we must have had fun. But when they're standing around there and Maharaj comes charging through with 200 devotees, it's like, that's the party. There is absolutely no doubt where the party is, right?
Yeah, we had the same experience at New Year's Eve in Montreal this year. And it was like hundreds of people following us.
Yeah.
It was like so surprising.
I did it one time in King's Day. I had to tie my shoelace and I got a little distracted, and suddenly I stand up and there's like the party is still going on, except I can't recognize anyone. And I'm like, suddenly I realize, oh, the Harinam is like 200 meters that way. I'm just following the tail end of it now, right? That's how many people were tagging along, right? It's incredible. And that is it's not the sound system, it's not the melody, it's not the musical technique of the mridanga player, it's the chit potency that flows through Maharaj, right? That's the eternal relationship, that it's imbued with actual internal potency, right? So that's why it's ever, what was it? Maharaj ends it. Events and activities are variegated, ever fresh, full of joy and eternal. Right, that's the chit potency. Otherwise it's empty and boring and costs more than it's worth. Really, that's just the material version of it, right? So, yeah.
So 27th of April,
20.
Amsterdam.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're gonna make the biggest King's Day ever.
Maharaj said, even if it's not here, it has to be completed.
Everyone should come.
It has to
December.
be.
It has to.
Everyone. So we will arrange, yes, because definitely.
Yeah. Exactly. Anything else? I'm sure you have something.
No, actually it's time.
Oh, it's time. Okay.
Yeah. We're a little over time.
Thank you so much for
Hare Krishna.
all your invitations
Ah,
and everything you told
thank
us.
you.
It's a lot of nectar, so we're very grateful for that.
Well, I'm
Thank you so
grateful
much.
too. You make me feel like I'm not a waste of space, so that's good. Hare Krishna.
Ter Kadamba Prabhu Die.
Kadamba Kanana Swami me. Jai. Prabhupada ki. Jai.